A very good morning, class. So, today we'll extend our chapter and do the rest of the chapter. So, in the previous class, we discussed about the various parts of brain. We discussed about the human brain and what were the peripheral as well as central nervous system composed of. Then we talked about the parasympathetic and sympathetic response, how they were uh, antagonistic to each other. And now I told you that we'll start in next class with the reflex action. So first of all, we'll discuss what are reflex actions. So the word reflex, the word itself is a very common word, and for defining the word reflex, we can use the term that whenever some sudden action is taking place in response to something that is occurring in the environment. So if something is occurring in the environment, like a very cold breeze is there, and the first reaction will be that you'll start to feel cold. So whenever something is changing around you and you react to that, that is the first that is the term that we use for reflex. So for example, when someone say that I jumped out of the way of the bus reflexly, so that whenever speed in some you're standing on a road and any vehicle comes in your way or comes in front of you, the first reaction will be you'll start to run off or you will jump. Whenever you'll see a dog barking at you or running after you, the first thing will be run. So these are things related to the reflex actions, and these will come on their own because you are coordinated with your brain. So there are some people they have lost the such coordination, and that's why they will not be able to take appropriate steps whenever some danger is there. So that's very problematic. So now we'll talk about the reflex arc. So let us consider that if we are touching a flame, and uh, touching a flame is very much urgent, and it is a dangerous situation for us, or in fact for any animal also. So then how do we respond to this? Then the first reaction will be very much conscious, and because we know that we also have the possibility to get burned from that, and therefore the first thing will be we remove our hand. So now what is an important question is, how long will it take for us for doing that or for removing the hand? So that time which we take is the reflex, that is a reflex action, the minimum time that we take for removing the hand if we are getting burned. So now we'll talk about the reflex arc. So we all know the designing of our body is very complicated and also very much specific. So rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, the nerves that detect heat, they simply get signals or any input signal, and these all input signals are associated in one spinal cord. So spinal cord is the main organ that is responsible for the reflex action. So whenever the input is there, all these input gets stored in the spinal cord and forms an arc like structure. This shapes gives of an arc. So these all combinedly called as a reflex arc. So wherever the connection of the signals is being done there, then the place where these are being input, they are being transferred from that place. Like for example, if from hand, if you are touching something hot, then from hand they will be transferred to the brain, going through different nerves, and then the brain gives the signal to remove our hand immediately. So this combined process of getting an intense whatever the problem, whatever the danger is there, like for example heat and all. So whatever the input is there, this will be called as input, and the output will be we'll remove our hand. So these combined actions will form a reflex arc. So these reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord, and although the information input also goes on, sometimes reaches the brain. So not only spinal cord, the brain also plays a very minute part in the reflex action. So of course, reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of brain is not fast enough. Therefore, spinal cord is associated with reflex action because brain is not so much fast. Therefore, these arcs are maintained so that the delivery of the message is done very quick. So in many animals, they have very little or none of the complex neuron network needed for thinking. So it is quite likely that the reflex arc has been evolved as efficient ways of functioning in the absence of true thought processes. So there are some lower animals in them. The nervous system is not very much well advanced or not very much well developed. So therefore, because of this, the evolving of this reflex arc has been done so that the efficient ways of functioning can be done even if the true thought process is not present. However, even after the complex network, the neuron networks have come to an existence, reflex arcs, they continue to be more efficient for quick responses. So reflex arcs are very much important for the quick responses by our body. These are the diagram. You can see the pathway of a reflex action. It called as the reflex arc. So in a reflex arc, the stimulus is received by the receptors. What are the receptors? The sense organ are the receptors. What are the six sense organs? We all know that: eyes, ears, nose. So and it passes through sensory nerves and to the spinal cord. So the nerves that carry messages from the sense organs to the brain are the sensory nerves, and from the brain, these are the motor nerves. So from the sense organs to the brain, the sensory nerves take the message, whatever the information is there, and from the spinal cord, the information passes through the motor nerves to the effectors, and these effectors, whenever the message reaches the effectors, we'll give the response, that is immediately remove our hand on touching any hot object. So this is the complete arc. You can see stimulus, the receptors are there, then the sensory nerves are being able to transfer it to the spinal cord. From the spinal cord, the motor nerves start to function and they take the message to the effectors, and then we give the response. And this is a very complex process, but it is also very much quick. That's why we are able to protect ourselves from getting burnt or any damage. So the reflex action, as I told you, is not only the function of the spinal cord. Then what is the other organ that is involved in it? The brain. So the second ways in which the nervous system communicates with the muscles is through the brain. The communication system between the central nervous system and other body parts is facilitated from the brain and spinal nerves. These are arising from the spinal cord. So the brain will allow us to think and take actions based on that thinking. So brain is first involved in thinking, and first the brain will think what the necessary actions has to be taken, and then these necessary actions will be implemented by us. So thus it is a very complex design with different parts of the brain responsible for integrating different inputs and outputs. Integration means combining of many things. So when many nerves are being combined in this process, then the appropriate outputs will come. The brain has three major regions. These are the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. I told you the various parts of the brain in the previous class itself. So now we'll finish up this topic, that is the coordination in animals. So the last question arises: how does the nervous tissues take actions? So far we have been talking about the nervous system and how it collects information and send it to the body. So अभी तक हम लोगों ने सिर्फ ये पढ़ा है कि nervous system कैसे help करता है collect करने में information और transfer करने में उसको तो through the different nerves to our body parts. So these information are being very much informative, and these only help the muscles to take appropriate actions against these stimulus. So in other words, when the action of or movement is to be performed, a nerve impulse reaches the muscle. The muscle fiber must move. And how does a muscle fiber move? The simplest motion of the movement at the cellular level is that the muscle cells will move by changing their shape so that they shorten. And the first reaction will be, if muscle is getting damaged, then it will start to move. और move कैसे करेगी वो अपने आप को इस तरह से move करेगी कि उसकी जो muscles हैं वो short हो जाएं length में. So that the next question is, now how do the muscles change their shape? So the answer lie in the chemistry of cellular components. The muscle cells have special proteins that change both their shape and their arrangement in the cell response to the nervous or the neuron electronic impulses. So जब भी कोई electronic impulse आती है muscle के पास, they have a protein which help them to change their shape. So when this happens, new arrangement of these proteins give the muscles a shorter form. So the proteins that are involved are very much helpful to shorten the muscles or to decrease the size of the muscle so that they can protect themselves from getting any damage. Now we'll talk about the next, that is the movement in plants. So first of all, let's talk about the introduction of this. All the living organisms show the irritability or the sensitiveness. So it is the property to give response to stimuli of every living organism. So the basic fundamental thing for defining a living thing is that it should give a response to any stimulus it is receiving. The stimulus can be external or internal. So the living organisms, they adapt themselves to the external and internal factors with proper adjustments. This adjustment of the vital activities of life is called as coordination. So coordination, what is coordination? जो adjustment हम लोग के बॉडी इंटरनल या एक्सटर्नल पार्ट्स करते हैं जो आउटसाइड इन्वायरमेंट के साथ, सो दैट दे कैन वर्क हैंड इन हैंड. और अगर जो सर्वाइव जो इन कंडीशन के साथ नहीं कर पाता है कोप अप, तो देन those organisms or those species get extinct. So coordination is very important. So the working of one system is to coordinate with the other system. For example, during eating, our body performs several kinds of coordinated activities. अगर हम लोग खा भी रहे हैं तो उस टाइम पे बहुत सारी coordinated activities साइड बाय साइड चलती रहती हैं. The nose differentiates the smell of the food, and the hands serve as the organs of ingestion. The alimentary canal and the glands help in digestion of food, and thus various organs perform the coordinated activities. So coordination is very important if we talk about both plants and animals. So what is control and coordination? The control and coordination helps us to maintain a steady state of the stability and steady state within an organism in constantly changing environment. तो हम लोग की बॉडी को एक कांस्टेंट steady state चाहिए होता है so that our body do not get very much quick changes, otherwise it will not be able to cope up. और इस steady state को maintain रखने के लिए coordination बहुत important है. So the mechanism of maintaining this internal steady state is called as hemostasis. Like for example, whenever a mountaineer is the person who climbs up a mountain. So if you all know that as we move at a high altitude, the level of oxygen decreases. So whenever a mountaineer feels lack of oxygen at higher altitudes, so in order to cope up with this condition, more number of RBCs start to produce. So this is an adaptation कि जब हम लोग higher altitude पे जाएंगे तो हम लोग की RBCs ज़्यादा बनने लगेंगी because RBCs help to restore oxygen. So it is the internal environment that adjusts to the external stress. And what is this external stress? That is the lack of oxygen. Similarly, the mammals are capable of maintaining a constant body temperature. The vital activities of an organism are controlled by the endocrine system and nervous system. So these are the two types of coordinator system, that is the endocrine and nervous system. Both these function side by side for maintaining a steady state of our body. So mainly the hormones of the that is the secretion done by the endocrine glands are very much helpful in maintaining the steady state. We all know there are two types of animals. What are the two types of animals? The hemothermic as well as poikilothermic. So we are the hemothermic animals that are warm blooded. They do not their internal environment do not change with the changing condition. So that's why the steady state is being maintained by the coordination of these two systems, the nervous and the endocrine systems. Now we'll talk about the chemical coordination in plants, that is the movement. How does the movement? We all know that human beings or animals shows movement. They can locomote from one place to another. So but in plants we cannot see these things happening, but there are some movements that are occurring in plants also. So the movements are fixed in the soil, so they cannot avoid various stimuli by moving away. We all know that in plants there is no brain-like structure, so to adapt themselves according to the changes in their surroundings, they have to show some movement. That is not a visible movement, like they cannot move from one place to another, but there some parts tilt or show some form of changes. Still, the plant show the positive or negative responses to light, water, gravity, touch, etc. So the movements of plants due to stimuli are called as the tropic or curvature movements. Whenever the plant is moving due to one stimuli, then we called it the tropic movement. The response of a part of the plant to light, whenever the plant is responding due in positive or negative sense, it can be both. Like if the flower or the plant is moving towards the sun, when the sun is rising, if the plant starts to move towards the sun and faces the sun, then it is the positive phototropic movement. Photo word is always used for the sunlight. So phototropic movement is the movement which the plant shows in response to light. It can be positive when the plant moves towards the light, and it can be negative when the plant moves away from the light. Like for example, in the slide itself you can see the bending of shoots towards the light, or if it is away from the light it is negative, it is towards the light it is positive. So phototropism is the word can be used for both negative and positive. Whenever the plant showing the movement due to the light, it is phototropism. The next one is the chemotropism. What is chemotropism now? The chemotropism is due to the chemical stimulus. Example, the growth of pollen tube. You can see in the picture this. We all know what pollination is, the transfer of the anther to the stigma. So the pollen grains, the anther release the pollen grains. These pollen grains are being transferred from one anther to the stigma of another plant. So this is pollination. So whenever the growth of pollen tube is there, it is due to the chemotropism. So chemotropism is due to the chemical stimulus that due to this response the direction of the movement starts, that the pollen grain is present here, and there are some chemicals present on the tip of the stigma. If that chemical matches with the need of this pollen grain, then only this pollen tube will be formed. Otherwise the pollination will not occur, and this pollen grain will remain dormant and will not show any activity. So this is the chemical movement, that is the chemotropism. That the movement will occur of the pollen tube only if the chemical suits the development or the functioning of the pollen grain. And the next movement is, what is the next movement now? The geotropism. So it is, for example, in the case of roots, you can see the movement of plants in response to gravity. If it is towards the gravity, it is positive geotropism. What grows towards the earth? That is roots. So roots shows positive geotropism, that is they are growing towards the earth. And geo word is always used for the earth. And if it is plant is showing the movement away from the light, away from the earth, it is negative geotropism. And shoots show negative geotropism, that is they are growing away from the earth. In this diagram you can see the roots growing towards the earth, the positive geotropism, and the roots growing away from the earth, that is negative geotropism. The other one and the last one is hydrotropism, that is the movement in response to water. So some plants also show movement in response to water, that we call as hydrotropism. So there are some other terms, that is vernalization and flowering. So the term vernalization was coined by Lysenko for the promotion of flowering by previous cold treatment. For example, that for flowering in winter varieties, there are some flowers which grow in winter, there are some flowers which grow in summers. So the flowers which grow in winters, they need winter cold treatment, and in nature the plant requiring cold treatment usually behaves as biennial. The germination, and they germinate and grow vegetatively in the first season and produces during second seasons after getting the cold treatment. That is, in first season, that is if the plant is getting the cold condition, then in the first season it produces by itself, but for making it produce flowers in the second season also, it has to be given some cold treatment. What is this cold treatment? The main cold treatment is given by liquid nitrogen. So liquid nitrogen, it is having a temperature of minus 196 degrees Celsius, so it is the best cold treatment chemical that can be used. So this is the suitable treatment for vernalization is 4 degrees Celsius, and the time period is 4 days to 3 months. So if the flower is being kept in this cold environment for about 4 days to 3 months, it will start to show flower only if it is a winter plant or winter flower. So now we'll talk about the growth regulators. What are the growth regulators? Let's talk about this movement also, the drastic movements. These are the non-directional movements which are neither towards or away from the stimulus. That is, it does not depend on growth. Like for example, you have seen, must have seen a plant called mimosa. So if we touch me not plant also we call it. So if we touch the leaves of that plant, it will start to close itself. So this is a kind of nastic movement. It is touch movement is also called as thigmostatic movement. Nastic movement is the term that is used for those movement which is neither towards something or neither away from something. So the movement of this is closure, that is neither towards something or nor away from anything. That's why it is called as nastic movement. For now we'll talk about the coordination in plants by talking about the phytohormones. So what are the various types of hormones? First and foremost is, these are also called as the growth regulators. So the growth regulators are the important chemical that are affecting growth. The growth hormones or the phytohormones are the natural growth substances which are produced in any part of the plant and are transferred to another plant as they influence the growth of the plant. So in plants they are not produced everywhere. One place they are produced and then the transfer of these chemicals occur to the other places. So the growth regulators consist of auxins, gibberellins, cytokinins, ethylene and abscisic acid. These are the various growth regulators. Except abscisic acid, ethylene, the three are called growth hormones, and ethylene, abscisic acid are growth inhibitors. So some of these are responsible for increasing the growth of the plant and some of them are responsible for decreasing the growth of the plant, that is inhibiting the growth. So auxins are the growth hormones which was discovered by the Charles Darwin. Auxins are the weak organic acid which can promote the elongation. So these are responsible for increasing the cell by cell elongation. Cell elongation occurs by repetitive cell division. The cell division occurs and this will helps in increasing the length of the plant. So these are produced in the apical meristem, that is the tips of root and stem. They are also produced in the young leaves, flowers, buds and fruits. So the first hormone, plant hormone that was discovered was indole acetic acid and it was an auxin. So the main function is for apical dormancy. Apical dormancy is the presence of the terminal or apical buds involves the failure of the lateral bud growth. Apical dormancy means when the auxin is being given to a plant, it will continue to show the tip growth, that is the tip of the stem and tip of the root would keep on going and the sideways growth will not occur. Then root formation is also being influenced by the auxins because they can induce the adventitious roots in stem cuttings. Cell division is the main process by which auxins help in regulating or increasing the growth. So now next one we'll talk about is gibberellins. So gibberellin also help in the growth of stem and branches. They have a unique property of increasing the height of plants, but they do not cause any curvature. Curvature is bending. So gibberellins do not cause any bending, but they increase the height of the plants. Gibberellins were first discovered in Japan by Yabuta and Sumuki, and what thing they were extracted from the rice plants that were infected with the fungus. The fungus that was present in those rice was Gibberellia fusicori. So that's why the term gibberellins is being given to this plant, to this hormone. So these rice plants were taural, they are very tall in length, but they were sterile. They were not having any fertility. So the functions of gibberellins were cell elongation, that is gibberellins cause stem elongation and expansion of the leaves in intact plants. Not only stem length will be increased, there will be also growth in the size of the leaves also. Gibberellins are also responsible for seed germination. The next one, so the next hormone we'll have to discuss is the cytokinins. So what are cytokinins? The cytokinins are chemically basic growth hormones. They promote the cell division in each plants. So this group of the phytohormones was discovered by the Carlos Mille, and from where it was isolated the crystalline substance from degraded DNA materials, and a DNA was there and it was being degraded, that is it was being broken down, and from that this hormone was isolated or taken out, and the term that was used for this was kinetin. So the function of cytokinins is the most important physiological effects of cytokinins is on the plant growth. So cell division, secondary growth, also they are responsible for secondary growth also. We saw in the auxins that they stopped the secondary growth, that is lateral growth was completely absent if the plant was being given the auxins, but cytokinins promote both the sideway growth as well as the apical growth. So cytokinins, so they overcame the effect that was given by auxins. So auxins gave the apical dominance effect, that was no lateral growth, but cytokinins overcame that, and they also started to show the sideway growth. The senescence, this what is senescence? The aging process, that is the growing old and dying away of the tree. It is the term used for this is senescence. So cytokinins also delayed the senescence or aging, so they kept the plant or the tree young for a longer duration. That's why cytokinins were very much helpful. The ethylene, what was the function of the ethylene? Ethylene is a gaseous hormone which is produced by almost all the fleshy fruits. Whatever the fruits that are fleshy, that is having pulp in them, they all produce the ethylene during ripening. So ethylene is an autocatalytic in nature. What is autocatalytic property? Is that the ability to promote their own growth. So they have an autocatalytic property, and the higher concentration of auxins is often induced by ethylene formation. So if the ethylene formation is higher in concentration, then it will automatically induce the auxins to increase in concentration. So what is the function of ethylene? The most important is fruit ripening. So for artificial ripening of the fruits, like for example, if some fruit is not being ripened when it is attached to the plant, then after plucking it off from the plant, these are given injections or treated with ethylene, so the ripening of the fruit will occur. The last one is the abscisic acid. So it is also called as the stress hormone of plants. What is stress hormone? Whenever the plant is growing under some stress, that is if it is growing under some drought conditions or very much high water is there, so these are the stress conditions. So it is also known as dormant, and whenever the stress conditions is there in a plant, it will produce abscisic acid. So who discovered it? Endicott and his co-workers first isolated a substance from the young cotton balls and named it as abscisic acid. So this was being formed from found in the cotton balls. This acid is now isolated from dormant seeds, buds and the other parts of the plants. Abscisic acid is a growth inhibitor. Abscisic acid also have no stimulating effect on any aspect of growth. So what is the abscisic acid doing? It is inhibiting the growth and also affecting the wilting of leaves. What is wilting? The folding of leaves. When it is not getting sufficient water, then it wilts. So what is the function of abscisic acid? Abscission. Abscission word is the word which is used for promoting abscission in leaves, that is it is helping the leaves to protect itself from getting wilting or aging. That's why it is also helped in maintaining the plant for a longer duration when it is under stress condition. So in drought condition, like when the plant is not having very much high water concentration which is needed, abscisic acid helps in closing the stomata, and therefore transpiration is being checked, and less transpiration will help the plant to retain water for a longer duration. So these are the various coordination in plants. So next we'll do in the next class.